If you feel stuck and self-conscious about sharing your ideas with a stranger in the IELTS test, then I'm going to help you fix this. A common problem is that in the IELTS speaking test, people get stuck on what they are going to say. One big reason for this is that they are expressing quite a personal opinion to a complete stranger. You need to be ready and know how you're going to express your opinions. Watch this video and get help on how to deliver your opinion with confidence. I'll show you the two different types of opinion that you're going to express, whatever the topic. I'll give you the language you need to do it. I'll show you some examples to help you get there. And of course, there are a few bonus extra tips and tricks that are useful to know as well. So, stay with me to the end. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is David Bourne. I am your IELTS coach from IELTS Breakthrough. This is a channel that helps you get a high score in IELTS so that you can study at an international university and progress in your career. Make sure that you click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's get started with the two types of opinion that you're going to express. That's right, the good news is that there really are only two types of opinions that you can give in the speaking test. It doesn't matter what your topic is that you're talking about, your opinions will either be 100%, that is a strong opinion where you completely agree or you totally disagree. And then the other one is where you agree or disagree, but not 100%. So we can call that the partial opinion. We have the strong opinion and the partial opinion. It's worth being clear in your mind if you want to discuss the strong or partial. And depending on the topic, of course, you're going to need to be able to communicate both. Let's look at how to communicate strong and partial opinions now. We'll start with the language that you can use. And let's begin with a strong opinion where you agree. So the first thing is to learn at the signal phrases that communicate to the examiner that you do strongly agree with the idea that is presented. Here are some useful phrases. I completely agree with that point. I couldn't agree more. That's exactly how I see it. Absolutely, that's spot on. Without a doubt, I agree. That's precisely what I think. I'm in total agreement. That's true, especially when you consider. Now, we can also use some of these phrases in a more informal tone. Note that the speaking test can be quite informal at times. So you might consider some of these shorter language phrases for expressing a strong agreement. Oh yes, definitely. Totally. Exactly. Completely. For sure. I feel the same way. That's so true. Let's just consider a few examples then to express a strongly agree opinion. Here is the question from the examiner. Do you agree that technology has made people less social? I completely agree with that point. Many people spend so much time online scrolling through social media. For example, we even see people sitting at a table in a restaurant, not looking at each other, but looking at their mobile phones. Notice I gave an example to explain the agreement as well. Here's one more example, and the examiner question is, would you say that working from home is more productive than working in the office? Absolutely, that's spot on. Without the time commuting and office distractions, people can focus more on their tasks. For example, many companies now have a work from home policy for their staff that applies maybe a few days a week. Again, notice that you can throw in an example that really strengthens your opinion there. If you can, make the example specific, but if you can't, a general example, just like I showed you there, will help too. Alright, so that's how to strongly agree. Now let's look at strongly disagreeing. When you strongly disagree, you might feel the need to be a bit more polite and diplomatic. So this language just softens it, and even though it communicates your disagreement, these phrases are useful because they allow you to show your opinion, but in a polite and non-confrontational way. Here they are. I'm afraid I have to disagree. Actually, I see things a bit differently. With respect, I don't share that opinion. That's not how I would look at it. I'd have to disagree with that idea. That doesn't really match my experience. You can also reduce these to even more simpler language, make it a bit more chatty, but note that they are slightly less diplomatic. Here are the shorter phrases. Not really, to be honest. I don't think so. No, I wouldn't say that. I'm not sure about that. That's not how I see it. Okay, and let's look at a couple of examples as to how you would express a strong negative opinion. Here is the examiner's question. There is an argument that we should all become vegetarian to help protect the environment. Do you agree? Actually, I see things a bit differently. While reducing meat consumption can help, I think a balanced approach might be better for most people. In fact, as an example, I would say most people love their chicken. It's going to be very difficult to get everyone to stop eating chicken. And the second example, I'm going to use the same question that I used previously about working from home. So the examiner question is, would you say that working from home is more productive than working in an office? And of course, this question could be answered in the agree side or the disagree side. So let's look at how to express an opinion that strongly disagrees. That's not how I see it. Working from home makes people lonely, and they lose the benefit of direct social interaction with their fellow workers. As an example, Apple ordered all of their staff to come back into the office so that they could get the benefit of social interaction. So in this answer you can see that I strengthened it with a specific example. I happen to remember the example of Apple. Of course, you can come up with your own examples. By the way, use examples that you know about. Don't try to lie to explain your opinion. If you do that, you're going to make it difficult for yourself if you're trying to remember your imaginary situation as well. So just share information that you do truly know. Alright, so we've looked at expressing strong opinions for agree and disagree. The other side of this is to express a partial opinion, or perhaps we can say a cautious opinion. So this is where you agree or disagree with something, but it's not 100%. And it's very likely that when you are sharing your ideas about a topic, you're going to want to say, it depends. Sometimes I agree, sometimes I disagree. So it's useful to have the language that you need to express this cautious opinion. Let's look at the useful phrases you can use first, then we'll go into some examples. I suppose you could say that. Well, it depends really. I guess there's some truth in that. I tend to agree, but not completely. That might be the case, but I'm not entirely sure. To some extent, yes. It's possible, though I'd need to think a bit more about this. I can see both sides of the argument. I'm not an expert, but I think perhaps, but it's a bit more complicated than that. Now, just before we go into some examples, I'd like to add a couple of extra tips here. The first tip is to use the phrase, I would agree if, after those introductory phrases that I just showed you. And then the second one is to use although. This allows you to recognize one side and then express the other side. So here are a couple of examples to show you what I mean. There is an argument that cities should ban all private cars. What do you think? Well, it depends really. Although banning private cars could reduce pollution and traffic, it might also make it difficult for people who rely on their private cars, especially in areas where the public transport is not very good. And one more example. Homework is unnecessary in modern education. Do you agree? I would say that's mostly true. I would agree if the teacher can make more interactive and practical learning exercises. Then traditional homework might not always be the best approach. But students can click on links and follow interactive exercises just to review the material from their lessons. There we go then. That's how we can express our opinions, strongly agree, strongly disagree, or giving a cautious opinion. I've got a few bonus tips that I want to share with you before we end this video. However, I just want to point your attention to the link in the description where I have a little exercise to help you understand and become familiar with these phrases. So just click the link. There's no registration or anything like that. You go straight into a little interactive exercise that will help you to remember the meaning of the phrases that I've just shared with you in this video. Let me just give you a couple of bonus tips and tricks before we end this video. The first tip is to be careful about delivering a non-opinion. Let me explain. Imagine the examiner asks you the question, do you think it is okay to eat unhealthy food like chocolate? And the answer from the candidate is, well, it depends. For people who like chocolate, I think it is okay. But for people who do not like chocolate, then I think no, it is a bad idea. So that kind of response is what I call a non-opinion. The examiner is left with no idea about whether actually it is okay to eat chocolate or not. So you're probably better expressing at least some kind of opinion. Probably, like most people, you might say, well, it is unhealthy, but sometimes we can eat chocolate on special occasions. Non-opinions are just not very communicative and they do not help your score. Now, the second tip is about pronunciation. If you deliver your answers in a flat pronunciation style, then it's not going to help your score so much. We are talking about opinions, and with opinions come emotions. Positive emotions when you agree, negative emotions when you disagree. So when you look at communicating your opinion, use stress and intonation to emphasize how you feel. As an example, if you want to say, I'm in total agreement, that's pretty boring. You need to stress the total and perhaps use some intonation rising here because you're expressing a positive attitude. I'm in total agreement. You can just listen to how I delivered the original useful phrases in this video and get an idea. Listen as to how intonation and stress is used in these examples. Now, there's one more tip, and this is related to learning these phrases. I know there's quite a lot of phrases that I've shared with you in this video, and I would recommend that you make a bit of effort to actually learn these phrases so that you can say them automatically in a speaking test situation. So why don't you put them on some digital flashcards to help you remember, and then review those flashcards periodically. Practice saying those phrases out loud. At least say each one 3 times during your revision session. Repetition will help you to get those phrases in there and ready to use anytime you want to. We've covered a lot in this video. Thank you so much for staying with me through to the end. Make sure that if you have any questions or you want to make any comments, then let me know in the comment section. I read everything and I reply to everything. It's always great to hear from you. And of course, remember, if you found this video useful, just like and subscribe to IELTS Breakthrough. It would be great to have you in the community. In the meantime, have a fantastic day. I'll see you in the next video.